Welcome to a live edition of the Audible, presented by Trader Joe's. It's been a long day of football, folks. I'm Ralph Russo from The Athletic, joined by Bruce Feldman. We may get Stuart Mandel later. He may be popping in here, but he's got some things to write, so he needs to do that job first before he does this job. Bruce, man, you were at the Rose Bowl. I was at the Orange Bowl, so we didn't get to see great games today. Interesting stories, but not necessarily great games. The two bookends of the CFP quarterfinals were awesome. Let's start with it started with Miami upsetting Ohio State on Friday night, and it ended with Ole Miss upsetting Georgia in the Sugar Bowl tonight, just a few minutes ago. Let's just start there. I think you and I especially had sort of settled on this was the game we least expected an upset because we thought Georgia had been playing so well rolling into this game. Ole Miss's defense not that great. Who knows, if some of the disruption with the coaching staff and Lane Kiffin leaving, finally catches up to them against a Georgia team that really had seemingly turned the corner since midseason. Not at all. Trinidad Chambliss turned into a legend if he already wasn't one. And Georgia and Ole Miss is going to the semifinals to play Miami. It was a really remarkable performance. There was some interesting coaching decisions at the end here. Is it just the Trinidad Chambliss show, Bruce, the final few minutes of that game?
Yeah, I'm kind of awed by this Ole Miss team to do what they did to beat a team that, remember, I think they were up by Georgia the first time they played by 9 going into the fourth quarter. They got outscored 17-0 in that game. You start to wonder if this team is playing so free, and Trinidad Chambliss has been a revelation. Division II star, wasn't the starter going into the year, played spectacular. There were a couple of throws. I was late to get into this game because I was, making my way back from the Rose Bowl. But I did see on my phone a remarkable throw on the run he made. And then I kept on thinking I saw a version of that like 3 different times. There were different throws. He was phenomenal. And what's amazing here, and I think there's some overlap with like the Michigan, Final Four team that goes on that run after Bill Frieder, is going to take another job and gets nudged out the door, and Steve Fisher becomes a hero of sorts for leading that team on a great NCAA tournament run. This team, you start to wonder, and I'm going to ask you this right out of the gate. Is it possible that they are better off without Lane Kiffin? Because, let me finish.
Yeah.
First of all, Charlie Weiss, great job calling the plays. We've been told Charlie Weiss is the play caller. But now look, up front, Lane Kiffin apparently gets like a $500,000 bonus now because the team that he's no longer coaching keeps going further in the playoffs. But I wonder, teams get better, good teams get better from, digging deep and pulling together and handling adversity. How much more adversity can you have than your own coach bailing on you before the playoff? In all this kind of circus, the portal is going to open up. The portal probably is open now, kind of,
yeah.
right?
That's right. Right. Yes, it's just opened 4 minutes ago.
Trying to poach, hey, guys, congrats, come play for me in Baton Rouge or whatever, But again, my question to you is it possible? We don't know the answer. Is it possible this team is better off in this situation after all that has gone on, that they've rallied together and dug deep, and they obviously have a good play caller in Charlie Weiss, and they play for Pete Golding? Is it possible they could be better off without Lane Kiffin?
Yeah, and I think so. I think yes and no there, because I understand what you're saying. I don't know if they are better off without him, but I think you're tapping into the right idea when you say like they are galvanized, right? They are here to prove that Lane Kiffin is not the reason why they are here, right? To a certain degree, you could see the circumstances bringing a team together, making them feel like we have something even more to prove, like we are being challenged here to prove our worth as players. And I don't want to say that there's no value to that. I think that there probably is some value in the way they're playing to sort of be like, like what's the major league, right? Let's just win the whole thing, right? Like there definitely seems to be something here at play that has a little bit of a mystical, magical feel for Ole Miss. And listen, they are good. The other thing too is this is the team that's only lost once all year, and you and I, especially me, I've nitpicked their defense, and this is the other thing. And Greg McElroy did a good job on the broadcast too of pointing this out. Last year's team was probably more talented, right? They were better defensively. They had a bunch of first-round draft picks.
Walter Nolan's an elite, D lineman. You definitely had some star caliber guys there.
And the fact that they are, again, sort of doing this as not an underdog per se, though they were underdog in this game, but they are doing this as the team that wasn't necessarily supposed to be doing this. And then the Kiffin stuff. Yeah, and Trinidad Chambliss is sort of the singular player version of the Indiana story, right? Which we'll get into in a couple of minutes. Like this is a Division II player who was recruited to just be like a backup and like a guy who was going to challenge the starter Austin Simmons, and now he is looks like one of the best players in the country. It's wild. I mean, there's so much to get into, like a little bit with the game here. Like Kirby's defense getting burned on that 3rd and long that set up the field goal was wild. Kirby going for it on a couple of 4th downs. It was an intense. I really did think that when Georgia went into halftime, getting the ball back, they're 21-12. They get the ball back at halftime, and you're sort of thinking, like, if they can score here, get a stop, maybe like it just seems set up for Georgia to like take control in the second half, and that did not happen at all. And then it all spun away from them, Bruce.
It felt a lot like a old Big 12 game, Ralph. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it had a little of that.
Yeah, you definitely had some big hits. I mean, when Branch lit up the Ole Miss receiver, I mean, it was a heck of a play. And I'm like, okay, this game's going to go into overtime. That's where it feels like. The other thing we haven't said, by the way, is one of the all-time clutch kickers right now. 50. What, he hit 2 56-yarders and then like striped the game winner. I mean, Carnero, impressive, like really impressive. And by the way, I forgot where he went. Was he at Western Kentucky?
Two records, like the first 2 kicks for like set the Sugar Bowl records, and he hit them easy, those 50 plus. Yeah. Right. And he was Western Kentucky, I think he was a transfer from.
I thought, to get back to my point a little bit about why they could be better, is it feels a little bit like there's been plenty of times, and the example my mind always kind of goes back to is when Oregon was playing at Ohio State when Kayvon Thibodeau was there, and he wasn't going to be able to play in the game. And sometimes when teams like miss their star player, I feel like everybody else is like, we got to play 5% better, just a little better. And they all kind of do it. And then all of a sudden you get surprised. Maybe there's something with the other team eases up in their mind a little bit. I don't think that's what happened today with Georgia. Kirby Smart was not going to be easing off the gas and, anyway. But I think sometimes it happens where the other team might get lulled into a little bit. But just look, this team looked like it was playing really aggressively, with the mindset of how they were calling plays. And again, I think this is, to go big picture for a second on the field right now, and we'll put Oregon aside for a second, the game you were at, but you have Indiana, which all of a sudden now doesn't feel like a Cinderella.
Let's get into that.
Because they kicked the crap out of Alabama.
Just
and
Alabama.
They don't look like anybody. Yeah, I know this only happened 2 years ago, or whatever, that he's been there, but it's amazing what a dominant team they are. And then you have Miami jumped all over Ohio State, who I think a lot of people, if you ask me, I would have said, oh yeah, the defending champs are the most talented team in the field. Their defense had looked really good. They have the best player in the country in Jeremiah Smith, and they have other good receivers and everything else, and Sands playing at a high level. And Miami just bullied them. Like they dominated the first half, and then they took over in the fourth quarter again. So you have this weird field, now with, I think a lot of people assumed it was going to be Carson Beck playing against his old school. And Pete Golding's team said, no way, we're not out of this. And then obviously you have Indiana and Oregon. Like, use that as the backdrop. I think Oregon's the one team you might say would be okay. I could kind of believe that, but here we are. It's an interesting Final Four.
It's a crazy Final Four. It's a crazy Final Four. I mean, because if you think about the weekend started with Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia all alive, and the idea that none of them made it through. These are the three dominant teams. You want to throw Clemson in, right? The four dominant teams of the last 5 or 6 10 years of college football. But like for those three teams to be eliminated from the playoff in one weekend, and we don't get any of them through, and we get all these sort of new money teams. Miami is the one outlier here, right? To a certain degree. Miami has a history. They've got 5 national championships. It's also been 25 years, and it's been 25 years in which they haven't been anywhere close to this too. So it's not just like it's 25 years that they haven't won a national championship and they've been on the verge and they pushed and they've been around it. It's been 25 years where they have been, where they've been out in the woods. So you talk about an Ole Miss program that claims some national championships from the late 50s and early 60s, an Indiana program that was the losingest program in the history of college football coming into this season. Oregon has been around this for a while, but also has no national championships. And to just see Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia get broomed, like the sport is changing so fast that we have moved away from the super team era dominated by those three programs to this new era where Indiana can invest and be great, and Ole Miss can invest and be great, and Miami can get themselves back to where they were by investing and paying their players and being great. And I don't know, it feels like a great moment for college football after a decade or so of, yes, it was fun to watch to a certain degree, the dominance of Nick Saban's Alabama dynasty and then what Georgia does with Kirby Smart. But to have this like quote unquote new blood in here has been really wild. And you're right. It just, we'll get to all the games. And maybe if you want to, talk about what you saw in the Rose Bowl a little bit, but that's the prevailing story is, man, like what has happened to college football over the last couple of years. We're seeing it playing out on the field, and it is wild.
It is. Let me go back to you mentioned the game last night. Right. At some point, I felt like you were probably a believer in Miami, at least talented enough to be dangerous. When you were watching that game, at what point did you think, man, Ohio State's in trouble here?
So the funny thing is at halftime, I
saw the prediction you made.
Yes, I texted both of you. It was 14-0, but Ohio State had moved the ball well enough that made me believe, I think Ohio State can still get their act together here. And I texted Stu and Bruce at halftime, prediction, Ohio State 21-17. And when it's 17-14 and Ohio State gets the ball back, I'm thinking, boy, I'm going to look like a genius. So I wasn't out on Miami, clearly when they threw the pick six, right? Because that was such a dramatic play that spun everything around. Ohio State was in the red zone and they throw the pick six and Miami's defense is playing really well, and all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, like this is really going to happen here. So I had never got to the point where I was completely out on Ohio State coming back and winning that game. In fact, what was most impressive is that Miami goes on that clock-killing drive, Bruce, to end up essentially clinching the game. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought a couple of things jumped out at me. One, Mario Cristobal built that team to be the bully of college football. And in the trenches, I mean, they dominated that like Ohio State could, really struggled, especially in the first half, but early in the game. Then they got the run game going in the third quarter. But I think it was the other side of the ball where, for a while it was Mark Fletcher, then Marty Brown came in and got rolling. And I think a couple of things started to stand out. I thought Miami outcoached Ohio State in that game. I thought Shannon Dawson was 2 steps ahead of Matt Patricia most of the night. And, credit to Carson Beck. I asked this, we do our live chat for The Athletic, and the first post I think I had was, which Carson Beck is going to show up? The one who was at Georgia in 2023, who played lights out against ranked teams, or the one who was from last year, who had 7 touchdowns and 7 picks and looked really shaky. And for a while this season, we saw a lot of that Carson Beck.
Mm-hmm.
He really, played pretty clean against A&M in a really windy day and didn't have to do a ton. In this game, I thought he was pretty sharp. And I also thought we saw the more physical team. And this was the big point for me. It wasn't just in the trenches. The most impressive stuff from Malachi Toney was actually in the run game, his blocking.
Yep.
You know who didn't play physical? The 2 Ohio State star receivers. I mean, on the pick 6, if Jeremiah Smith can block Keontae Scott, he doesn't look like he's shot out of a cannon to pick off that pass and go 70 yards. Also, Carnell Tate, he's kind of short arms a ball over the middle. It wasn't that bad of a pass. He just didn't attack it, and it just felt like Miami's guys looked like they came to play. And ultimately, it felt a lot like Ohio State's gotten stale a little bit. That's what I felt from the play calling and kind of how the operation was. I know there was a lot of, moving parts with the staff, with Brian Hartline now taking the USF job. It just, man, they sputtered down the stretch in those last 2 games.
The couple of things that stood out to me, and this is one of the things that I tweeted right after the game, it felt like an NFL playoff game, right? Very low possessions. Ohio State only had the ball essentially 3 times in the second half, which, by the way, I think that if you want to blame some coaching, hey, man, you can't play that slowly. Like they had 2 great touchdown drives to start the second half, but they took about 11 minutes combined. Like, hey, man, you're already down 14-0. You're huddling and you're moving really slowly. And like let's move this thing along. Like, especially against another team that plays slowly and can dominate the clock. Because what I said, they just didn't have enough possessions. But that makes it, again, feel like an NFL game. Very physical. The team that was better on third down, which was Miami. I think Miami converted about 50%. And I think Ohio State was like 3 of 12, something along those lines. So it's who's better on third down, who has the big takeaway, right? Miami had the big takeaway, the pick 6, and Miami was better on third down. Like, I don't think Ohio State got dominated, but they were absolutely not the better team. Miami was the better team, but again, those like NFL type games where 2 teams are relatively similar, it becomes third down, key downs, takeaways, and Miami was the better team there. And you're right, Beck played a really safe game. And, listen, Mario has built, when Mario is having trouble his first couple of years, one of the things the thing I would say about him is that I think he will recruit his way out of this. And this is not to take away, because you're right. I think they were the better coach team. Coaching physicality, coaching violence.
His word.
That's coaching, but that is also coaching. You can, we can nitpick game management and this and that and the other thing.
And he's not the play caller, by the way.
Yeah. And Shannon Dawson coached a great game, and he's built a great roster. And kudos to, Mario. He's like, I know the U's not back yet until they win a national title, but I thought this was a team that could possibly be a national champion coming into the playoff. I felt like this was the lowest ranked team that could. And now they're going to play Ole Miss, and the winner's going to, go play for a national championship. And that just sounds crazy to think that we've gotten to that point. So let's,
By the way,
are you good here? Or you want
to
to go to the Rose Bowl?
One thing it dawned on me that our Final Four, all has Saban guys coaching in it.
Yes, that's another thing.
I
Yes.
mean, how about that? So tell me
I mean,
about
there's
like
not
I
much to
watch.
say about the Rose Bowl. I didn't get a chance to watch it intently because I was writing at the time, though I had it on a screen next to me. And I'll just say, like, my takeaway, Bruce, was like, in the Indiana just did to Alabama what Alabama used to do to other playoff teams. They
Yeah,
were so much better than Alabama.
my story from the Rose Bowl was basically this. If you're watching it from up high, like in a press box, it looked like a spring game. Both teams, similar color red from a distance, red helmets, red and white. And if you, unless you're a football fan under 10 years old, you're like, okay, the team that's kicking the other team's ass, that's way more physical, that's Alabama, and the other team is Indiana, because Indiana's not supposed to be very good, and Alabama's supposed to be great, and it was something to behold because they almost had two backs go for 100 yards, and Kalen Black and Roman Henby. After a while, it just looked like Ohio, like Alabama did not haven't play with any edge or any energy, and they looked like they were starting to give up. The guy who's the smallest guy on the field, D'Angelo Pons, had the biggest hit. He jolted Ty Simpson in the back, knocked the ball loose, also basically knocked him out of the game as well. I mean, that was a big play because it was a 3rd and 7, I believe, and Simpson scrambled to pick up the first down, but after 9 yards, he got the ball knocked loose, and then
Yeah,
it was like a 10-play Indiana drive. They went up 17-0. Alabama
that
gets the
was it.
ball.
Yeah.
Alabama gets the ball to start the second half, and the first play they call is trips, and with a tight end set to block, and they're going to throw a quick screen to Ryan Williams, and Indiana's safety blows past Josh Cuevas, the tight end, and knocks Ryan Williams down 2 yards behind the line. And it felt like at that point it was like, no matter what you do, it ain't gonna matter. We have all
Right.
the answers. And talking to guys on that staff after the game, there was a couple of things like that stood out. One was just like, hey, we are getting better and better and better. People forgot, like the leading pass rusher in all Power Four, Stephen Daly, didn't even play. He's out, and they didn't miss him at all. They completely shut them down. And at the end of the game, I saw Rhett Lewis, who works for NFL Network and BTN. He's a former Indiana football player, and we were just kind of talking about it. And he was like, "Have you ever seen anybody beat Alabama like that?" And he pointed to the scoreboard. And I was like, well, they just got whooped by Georgia. He was like, yeah, but wasn't that like 28-7 or 21-3? He's like, that's 38-3. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, not only that, that's Indiana that did it. It ain't Georgia.
Yeah.
And so in 2 years, Signetti has completely changed the whole narrative. And what also stood out to me going in the Alabama locker room, I remember being in an Alabama locker room. This was back when um, probably like 6 or 7 years ago. And I remember it was like Ryan Anderson was one of their better defensive players. And they got knocked out of the playoffs, and they were pissed. I mean, it was like uncomfortable in the locker room. There was so much like angst and everything. This was like a somber, defeated team. It was just kind of sad. And we'll see what happens. I mean, it's going to be an interesting offseason there for Kalen DeBoer, try to pick the pieces back up together. Because, I mean, you talk to some of the players, and they were like, well, we're better than we were last year because at least we made the playoffs. So that was a step.
Which honestly, like, I don't know if they were all that much better than they were last year. It broke, the playoff thing broke their way this year. It didn't break their way last year. I don't know if they were a better team this year. And that's we're not going to relitigate whether they should have been in. Maybe we can, maybe they shouldn't have been. But my point is, like, the difference between we got in this year and we didn't get in last year, like, I don't know, man. That might just be like the circumstances around you, and you got a little lucky this time to get the call where you didn't get the call last year. But I don't know if they got much better because they didn't. And they did. They get so out physicaled by this Indiana team. Again, I'm at a loss for words for the turnaround under Signetti. It has no precedent it might be the greatest story in the history of college football, frankly, if they win the national championship. It might already be. I use this term a lot, this like they play violently, because it's a violent game, and being violent is an advantage. You want to be the more violent team. The other thing, the difference between what happened in the Georgia Dome, not the Georgia Dome, in Mercedes-Benz Stadium at the SEC championship game, Georgia gets up on Alabama and Kirby is, playing the clock a little bit. We're just going to sit on this because I'm not saying he's having mercy on Alabama, but that's just the nature of the way Kirby wants to play, right? We're going to get this lead. We're going to sit on it and we're just going to go home and get this W. Indiana scores 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, right? There is no letting up, right? Like if they get on top of you, they are going to bury you. And that's, I think, indicative of the way they want to play and what makes them so good, right? We are never stopping. We are going to keep scoring. We are not going to back off here. Like
it's not just that not just that we're going to keep scoring. So Ola Adams is their defensive backs coach, and he is telling me, with 3 minutes left in the game, I'm on my safeties about we got to reroute the receivers. He was like 17-2. That's right. Lottie Brooks and Ryan Williams. They're really dangerous. You gotta be really physical with them so they can't get going. And
it's 38-3. Yeah.
As we get into the playoff, the teams are only going to get better. We have to get better. And these are opportunities for you to get better. So that's the philosophy, is like, you can call it running up the score. We're calling it really getting good attention to detail and getting better and improving.
And it's not it's not running up the score. Like, I don't believe in running up the score. We're all big boys here. Everybody's getting paid. Literally, everybody's getting paid now. This is not running up the score. You guys are playoff teams. This is not FBS, FCS nonsense. And by the way, Sigs doesn't let off the gas on those games either. Right. But again, it's indicative of the way they play and how they become so dominant. And it was wild to watch. So I have a funny story. So and then we'll get on to the blowout that I watched at the Orange Bowl. So I'm watching. We're Manny Navarro, our teammate from the Athletic, and I are watching the Alabama game as we're winding down and getting ready to file out our stories. And when Alabama kicks that field goal in the third quarter, I guess it was 24-0, and they kick a field goal, and it was 4th and short. And I'm like, yeah, you're really going to kick this sad field goal here? And man, he looks at me as like, hey man, Kalen ain't going home with a 0. Like he's got to avoid the shutout. Like, I don't think, and I was kidding around with it because it was still early in the third quarter. I'm like, I don't know. Like, you got to kind of go with it here. Manny and I get in the car, so we're no longer watching the game. And toward the end of the car ride, I flip up the phone. I'm like, dude, it's 38-3. And Manny's like, I told you, he needs to kick that field goal, man. He was going to get shut out. He knew he was going to get shut out if he didn't kick that field goal. So it just sort of sums up, again, where everything is with Indiana. I can't even comprehend it. I don't know if you had a chance to watch much of it. Was probably the worst of the game. So we don't have to spend a whole lot of time here in terms of not just the way it played out, but how interesting it was. Texas Tech had no answers for Oregon's defense. We were all a little worried about what Texas Tech's offense would be. They relied very heavily on explosive plays. Baron Morton is a good player, but, maybe not the most dynamic quarterback. They did some work in the portal on the offense, but not quite what they did on the defensive side. Texas Tech defense came to play. David Bailey was really good. They gave Dante Moore and Oregon all kinds of fits. Oregon couldn't run the ball. But, Texas Tech only broke the 50 3 times, and one of them was kind of a little late in the game. The one time they got in the red zone, Brandon Finney Jr. picks it off. It was still only 13-0 at the time, and you had this feeling of like, boy, Oregon's really dominated this game, but they've left so many points on the board because they haven't kicked some field goals. If it's 13-7, all of a sudden this is like a real game. Morton gets intercepted in the end zone, and at that point it's like, oh yeah, we're done here. And it was a really good performance by Tosh Lupoy and his defense. Like, Oregon hasn't won many big games during the Lanning era, really by its defense. And they did that this time, Bruce. I think that was the most important thing. I think our pal James Crepia, who covers Oregon for the Oregonian, sort of drove that home to me as we talked about it in the hospitality suite watching the Ole Miss game. Like, what really stood out is, I'll give him credit for this, is not just that Oregon won with defense, but that's just not the way they've won a lot of big games over the last few years with Lanning.
I would ask you this. So we've talked a bunch about Texas Tech and Cody Campbell and the money they've spent. We also, last week, we were talking about Stu's story about the budgets of teams and how much quarterbacks are going for and everything. One of the things I had wondered a little bit about last summer around Big 12 Media Days is, Behren Morton's a good quarterback. But if you're going all in, and they spent a fortune on both lines, especially the D line, are you like overlooking the obvious here? Is that quarterback good enough where you feel like he can lead you to a national title? Now, obviously, I felt like one of the challenges with Behren Morton, he got banged up a lot in his college career at times, but he was a productive quarterback, and I think he was good enough to get them in the playoff. The question was going to be, and look, everybody missed except for Ole Miss, and even they didn't know what they had until mid-season with Trinidad Chambliss. But you're seeing quarterbacks go for $4 and $5 million, and maybe that was the one mistake. If you're Texas Tech, they didn't score a point, right? And one of the things they spent money on Quentin Joyner, the running back from USC. He got hurt before the season. The other two running backs played really well this year without him. Yeah, I think the receivers are good. Their tight end is I don't know what Carter. He is in the NFL. Yeah,
Carter's a good player.
He is a good player. It's just, again, it's revisionist history. I just wonder if you ask Cody Campbell, you'd be like, would you regret that you guys didn't go heavy in the portal for a quarterback?
Yeah. So Manny and I talked about that too, because he wrote more about Texas Tech and sort of explored that idea of like, if they could go back and do it all over again, would they invest differently? It's hard to play the hypothetical game because who's available, who's going to be so much better than Behren Morton. And sometimes you can make up for a little bit of talent with just, hey, this guy's really experienced. He knows our system, and we can elevate him by putting good pieces around him. And of course, the other thing that we talk about all the time is you talk about what we said with Miami, right? Carson Beck has been very good and efficient, but Miami built out both lines of scrimmage, and they're a super physical team, and that's how they've gotten over the hump. So I think if you're Texas Tech, you hear so much about, and it's true, what separates these Big Ten and SEC powerhouses? Line of scrimmage, defensive and offensive lines. That's the place where if we build up those, that's where our money needs to go. That's where our attention to build up our team needs to go. And they did that. So I understand the rationale if you're sitting back. And again, it's easy to play 20/20 hindsight. I understand the rationale if you're sitting there last winter. How do we build this to look like an SEC team? How do we build this to look like the top of the Big Ten teams? We build those lines. And the lines, especially the defensive line, played great today. Lee Hunter was really good as well. Maybe the offensive line could have been a little better. But Oregon has 4 NFL guys across the line. So, the offensive line is what it is. But I see what you're saying. And I'm sure there's a lot of Texas Tech fans. I was in an elevator with one of them who said something similar. So I know that's going to be a talking point for Texas Tech fans. But I also understand this idea of like what separates us from these other teams is supposed to be on the line of scrimmage. That's where we put our money. And then it backfired in the end because these other teams were just as good on the line of scrimmage. And they had Dante Moore. And Dante didn't play a great game, but he was pretty good considering he didn't get great pass protection and they had very little running game either. So in a similar situation to Morton, he was making some plays and moving the sticks and getting them at least into range to kick some field goals. So, one team has an NFL quarterback and the other team has a guy who's maybe, more of a guy who maybe could be a backup in the NFL.
Can I ask you if you put any stock? So again, Indiana, you're the one outlier here. You're the one
What
team
an
that were
idiot I
like,
was. What an idiot.
well, I mean, they didn't buy, no buy, who cares?
Yes.
We're gonna win. Everybody else though had the buy, lost. Now last year was a little flukier to me because the seeding was screwed up. You
Right.
had teams like I'm not saying that wasn't a factor in some teams having rust or anything, but it was just like who should have been seeded and who shouldn't have.
Yeah.
This year was interesting in that regard, where it looked like, maybe some of these teams, Ohio State's offense did not look as sharp. It looked stale. Now, there could have been reasons for that. Obviously, Texas Tech's offense sputtered all over the place. Georgia wasn't an offensive issue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'll be fascinated by the postmortems on the Sugar Bowl tonight, just because it looked almost like a basketball game, and I don't mean this in a negative way. It looked like a basketball game where you had two guys doing Steph Curry, where it was almost like, holy cow, he's making that shot. That's a guarded 3-pointer, and he steps
Yeah.
back and hits it 5 feet, from the logo. Like, it felt like Trinidad Chambliss was hitting shots from the logo. At least a couple of the throws I saw. I didn't see the whole night, but just
And Stockton had some plays too. A lot of the escapability stuff, right? Like the guys just getting hit. He was taking some shots and getting the ball off and making some plays while taking some shots. He wasn't as good as Chambliss, but he was really good too. So, I mean, you did have a little shot for shot there. Maybe it's I don't know, Steph and Brunson, right? Like I'm not as much of a basketball fan. It's a little hard for me to pull there. But the fact of the matter is, like, Stockton played really well too, and similarly to Chambliss, in that he was like it was a little backyard football there for a while. But yeah, I don't know about the buys and stuff. Like I'm still really skeptical. I mean, I know people are just going to say, well, listen, it's 1-6, right? No, what
1-7.
1-7. So how could it not be a factor? I don't know, man. Like, I watched Oregon and Texas Tech play, and you can tell me Texas Tech was rusty, but I also think I know which one of those is the better team, right? And Georgia certainly didn't look rusty. I think Georgia just didn't play as well as it needed to play. So I understand that's going to be the narrative, but I'm still skeptical that is a real thing.
Fair enough. Well, it looks like we're not going to be joined by our friend Stu. I think. Did Stu go out for drinks tonight?
No, he's got writing to do, and we are writers first. Sometimes we all forget that because we do a lot of podcasts these days. But we are writers first, and we have editors to report to and to hit deadlines for. And I know you're not going to tell your editor, hey, man, I got to do a podcast, so you got to wait half an hour for this story. And your editor is the same as Stu's editor. So and I wouldn't do that to my editor either. So I totally get Stu blowing us off here. Man, like, I don't know. I want to give we can sort of wrap this up here. But again, the overarching theme of this, like, changing of the guard of college football, we will get more into that as we move forward here. I don't know. I think college football is more fun this way. I understand the reasons how we got here are not necessarily so much fun because there's kind of chaos off the field and there are no rules and regulations. But on game day, it has created a lot more interesting results and some wild turns of events for programs. So I understand there's a lot of chaos off the field that sometimes makes it feel like college football is in danger. But the fact of the matter is, I don't know if the product has ever been better on the field, Bruce.
No, I mean, it's wildly unpredictable right now. I just think if you had said, Oregon again has been good for a long time, right? But you have these coaches who are all, Pete Golding just became the head coach, right? Good on him that he's, flourished in the moment. Mario Cristobal, who I feel like has been kind of dogged for a while
No doubt,
for his reputation as a game coach. Signetti, who's been come off the moon, it seems like.
Right.
And you have Dan Lanning, who's since he's been the head coach there, has had a lot of impressive moments.
48-7, I believe, if I remember correctly in his story. Now he's now either 47-8 or 48-7. I can't remember which one, but it's pretty amazing.
Don't leave for what seems like the greener pastures, Dan. It may never be this good.
Yeah,
because that record sounds a lot like 46-7, and I know who had that record. So,
yeah.
It was. Yeah, I'm very curious because I think any team, after what I saw tonight in the Sugar Bowl, I think any one of these four teams can win the national title.
Though, are we slighting Indiana by saying that?
No,
I just because I've been Listen, nobody's been slighting Indiana more than me this year. I refuse to. I always had them a little ranked, a little, not a lot, but a little lower than the consensus
invincible?
was. I guess I'm not saying they're invincible, but I also am coming to this, like, I'm having a come to Jesus moment where I'm like, I have to stop underestimating these guys. And I know the Alabama pick was a little bit whimsical. I was just looking to do something different. I even conceded on our last show. There are none of these numbers that I like to look at that say Alabama should be in this game.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you were slow to realize Alabama is not that good. And I say that just because
I think that's fair.
I remember you really had a hard time when they lost at home to Oklahoma. It was like, oh, they were the better team. And I'm not saying Oklahoma was like the Bob Stoops national title team, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
But it was just like, after what we saw, I was like, maybe the Georgia thing was not an aberration, but it was just like, one of those things. And again, I that's not a knock on Indiana. I think if you ask me who is the safest pick of the Final Four, because they're the most consistent team, I would say it's Indiana. But I do think I just watched a guy, hit, 11 of 16 threes.
Right. And
I don't, wouldn't want to play him, and they do have a really good running back. And they do have like some weapons to work with on offense. They can win in a high scoring game. Can they win if it's 14-9? I know Indiana can win that way. I know Miami can win that way. I'm pretty sure Oregon can win that way. I don't know if Ole Miss can do that, but they're dangerous. And
here's the thing, though. I think, Bruce. I think if it was I'm trying to fight this as much as anybody. So when I say we are doing this, I more so mean me. So maybe I'm trying to like retrain my mind here. If another team had beaten Oregon, Ohio State, and Alabama, and beat the hell out of Alabama, I understand this is not a vintage Alabama team. I guess what I'm trying to position Indiana is they're the number one team in the country. Indiana is undefeated, number one team in the country. They should be the clear favorites heading into it. Yes, I think in today's where we are this year, it's fair to say we are going to head into the Final Four with four teams that I think could win it. But I also want to finally give Indiana its due here and say that's the clear favorite. Because if this was Ohio State doing what we just saw, I would say that's the clear favorite. And I think Indiana is fair to be called the clear favorite going into next week's semifinals. So This is me finally giving Indiana its proper due. I feel like I have, but I just haven't enough. This is me.
I feel like whoever wins this national title of these four teams, you are going to get a remarkable story. Obviously, the Indiana story is one for the ages.
It's a cool story, yeah.
I think the Ole Miss, if they somehow win after all the Lane Kiffin drama, that's the only thing that's close to what's gone on in Indiana. And then Oregon's never won. They've been close. They've never won. And Miami hasn't won in 25 years, or, give or take a couple of years, almost 25 years. I guess it's 25 years. It is 25 years. So what?
For folks who have become like us who have found ourselves over the last few years, like, how am I going to write about Alabama again? How am I going to write about Georgia again? How am I going to write even about Ohio State, though Ohio State's ride was unique last year, so that made them a little easier to write about. But yes, there'll be fresh storylines for us to dig into over the next week or so, over the next week or so, and really over the next the rest of this playoff, no matter how the semifinals go. All right, man. Again, no Stu. That's okay. Let's wrap this up. We miss him, but we made it without him. We survived. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this live stream, wrapping up an amazing couple of days of playoff football. Thanks so much, Bruce, for you'll at least get to go to bed at a normal time. I'm here on East Coast time. Always join us at least twice. I don't even know when we're going to come back again. I think Monday, normal Monday show for The Audible presented by Trader Joe's. You can always find us on YouTube at The Audible Show.
At Audible Show.
At Audible Show. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see y'all real soon.